Welcome back to another episode of Angst, hosted by Stephanie Davis and Donnie Davis. And we are delighted to welcome back Dr. Sable to the show. Round of applause. Break for applause.
Yay, Sable's back.
Thank you for coming back.
Happy to
We
be here.
didn't scare you away the first time.
Not at all. I love spending time with y'all.
Well, thank you. We love spending time with you too.
You got anything new in your life since the last time we spoke?
No, I mean everything's just been rocking and rolling over at
Yeah.
Ellie Tanglewood, and I'm super happy to still be here after 6 months of being here.
All right.
Yeah, so we're hiring more therapists. Everything is really great over here. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we survived a week of freezing and then a week of flooding, and now we're here. I'm curious, like, what the next trial and tribulation that we will face.
What's the
Is-
next plague? What is
There's
the next plague?
Rain of
Guys-
fires next week.
No, I saw a thing on
Oh,
the
the locust
internet.
thing. Sorry,
The
go ahead.
locust. It's like
Yeah,
every
that's
how
next.
many years?
Like 13 years or something like that.
Of course, 13. Lucky number 13. They're coming, guys.
Yeah, craziness. So, Sable's here. We're very excited. We have a broad topic to discuss, and we'll do our best to kind of weave our rabbit trails along the way. But today we're talking about anxiety as it presents itself in relationships.
Ooh, it's
And-
going to be a good one.
It is going to be a good one. This is not a free couples therapy for us. This is more of for the listener. But we have discussed this previously, more just in our own Donnie and Stephanie relationship. So this is just meant to be more of a resource and kind of just, I think, super interesting topic. So I will do my best to shut up now and let the Honorable Dr. Sable get started.
Yeah, absolutely. So, probably the biggest thing that I wanted to mention, and you guys have already kind of talked a little bit about your own anxiety and how it impacted your relationships. But when it comes to anxiety in relationships specifically, there's almost like two different camps that people can kind of be in. Either you're too dependent or you're too avoidant. That probably rings true for a lot of different people.
I'm trying to think who's the most dependent between me and Donnie, and I think it's pretty equal. Feel like we're both pretty dependent on each other.
And that's
Yes.
perfectly fine. And I
Yeah.
think and there is a healthy form of codependency, because a lot of people think codependency is just awful, horrible. It's not helpful. There can be a strong, important level of codependency, especially when you bring children into the mix, when you're trying to build a life together. You want to kind of be on the same page about a lot of different things. And you want to be able to support each other as much as you can too. So there is a way to form a healthy codependent relationship that isn't going to have all those negativity breeding symptoms that you might see in a relationship.
So what are those symptoms? Unless you were about to get to that, I'm very sorry.
No. You're fine. You're good.
What are some signs of you're like, oh gosh, this is actually negatively impacting our relationship?
So if you think about too, just the symptoms of anxiety, when you overthink, when you think of those worst case scenarios, being super indecisive, fearing rejection from somebody. So you sometimes won't even bring up those hard topics, seeking out that constant communication and getting anxious if you don't get a response very quickly. Those are all really, really clear signs that maybe there is more of a dependent nature in your relationship. Oftentimes we want to know that our partner loves us, right? Sometimes they show, we know about the love languages and we can dive into that too. But we know that people show their love in different ways. And we also need to understand how our partner likes to receive love too. So if a partner really wants you to respond to them quickly, but you're at work, all you can do, of course, is apologize and try and make up for it in those other ways that a partner may feel like they are loved. But sometimes we get in a situation where we kind of set traps for our partner to kind of
Oh boy.
see if maybe they really do love us and they really do care about us. For instance, one of the things I think about is a friend of mine several years ago. She was out with a new acquaintance of hers, and a new boyfriend, space between boy and friend, not quite official yet.
Right.
And so what they did, or what she did, was she wanted to kind of test him. She has like a history of anxiety, but she wanted to test him a little bit. And there was a very pretty girl over in the corner at the bar they were at.
Oh boy, I'm stressed about this.
And so, of course, she noticed her right away. And she
Mhm.
thought that when they walked in, her new boy space friend
Right.
saw her too. And so while they're sitting there, his back is to that girl. And she just, she strikes up a normal conversation in the middle of the conversation. So, oh, that girl's really pretty over there. And he just kind of turns around and says, oh, well, yeah, she's pretty. And she immediately like latched onto that. Well, oh, is she prettier than
Really?
me? Is she prettier than me? What's so great about her? You don't even know her. Like
Right.
just a lot.
Her
And
breath probably stinks.
exactly what's so great about her. Her shoes don't even match her outfit. Like she was just going off. And he, of course, poor thing, was just sitting there,
Just
just
trying to be
agreeing.
honest.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and he was like, "Oh yeah, she's pretty, yeah." But he left it at that.
Right.
It's not like he dwelled on it. He didn't like expound upon the great.
Right. Smart man.
None of that. All he did was, "Yeah, she's pretty. Let's move on."
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah,
So
that's a very clear
I have
indication that something's going on.
I've done this to Donnie before, not to trap him, but to see if he would tell me the truth. Well, maybe that is setting up a trap, but I'm like, this
You walked right into that
I
I
was
one.
gonna
did.
let you
Yeah.
As soon as it came out of my
I was
mouth.
letting you cook on that one just to see.
Because it'd be like, clearly it's okay to think someone else is pretty, right?
Absolutely.
And I'm secure enough for him to, I think, admit that another woman is beautiful, right? So I have done this to you before, but like, hey, do you think she's pretty? And if he's like, no, not really. And I'm like, you're not telling me the truth because there's a very clearly beautiful woman. And why aren't you telling me the truth? Or, yeah, she's pretty. And it's like, whew, I'm so glad you could admit that to me that it just makes me feel better if he could honestly admit, yeah, she's pretty. And then we move on.
Yeah,
There are
exactly.
probably times.
That's the key, moving
Yeah.
on from it. If you dwell on it, if you overthink it, that's a clear
Hmm.
indicator that something deeper is going on with yourself. That's that anxiety creeping up within your relationship.
Yeah. I do probably like at the beginning of our relationship, I was very insecure. So there are things like that. I don't know if I trapped you, babe. But I would get very insecure about stupid things that now I would be like so embarrassed to even think twice about. I can't even think of a scenario, but babe, you're just so cute. I got to stay protective of my movements.
Protect your property.
That's
Right.
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 So, ladies, what's up with us in these traps? And you
I
poor guys,
know.
you don't even know. You're just trying to vibe.
I
So I feel like on that topic, it's not always about insecurity around other women that we're talking about, right? Because like I had this group of guys that they called them shit tests. And what they meant was basically like she's going to like ask me to do something above that everyone knows is like above and beyond the Call of Duty and see how I react to it. Or present, the famous meme, like if I was a worm, would you still love me? Like all those kinds of things that typically women do. If I woke up and I didn't have any legs, would you still love me? All that kind of stuff.
There's actually a
Um
new one going around. I don't know if you guys have heard about this one. This one's a little not quite the worm thing because I've never understood that.
Right.
But there's a new one where a woman has a like a tangerine or like a little clementine or something, like the little
Mhm.
oranges,
Mhm.
and they'll be like, "Hey, babe, will you peel this orange for me?" And they just see how their partner responds.
mhm.
So that's kind of setting a little bit of a trap to see if they will help them because she is perfectly capable of doing
Right.
it herself. In some cases they might make it up an excuse like, "Oh, I just did my nails."
Mhm.
In one case there is a funny video where a guy was like, "Oh, sure, I'll do that for you. I just paid for those nails. Let me do that."
That's right. I pay for those.
So there is like a way that some people might do that, just like on the low end of the scale. That's that to me. But some of those other questions, like, yeah, if I was an earthworm, would you still love me? Would you still get married to me? Would you?
No, I
No,
wouldn't.
no,
It'd be really
exactly.
weird to marry an
And
earth.
we wouldn't even meet.
Exactly.
I'd
Your life
squish
on this
you.
earth would be very, very short as an earthworm.
Sometimes I guess they could be a test, and also I feel like sometimes those are just like somebody reaching out for like a little bit of extra love, but that
Mhm.
could also be a test at the same time, right? Like,
Yeah.
maybe just wanting to be nurtured a little bit in the moment.
Yeah, and some people do have difficulty communicating that need, especially if you are, I guess, more prone to anxiety or if you have an anxious attachment style. You're really constantly seeking that validation because you didn't get it. Because whenever I can kind of dive into this now, there is an anxious attachment style that is rooted in childhood. So yes, sometimes it is your parents' fault. Sometimes. And that anxious attachment style, there's all sorts of like secure attachment styles, and you can dive deeper into that on your own time. But anxious attachment styles specifically are whenever, yes, you may get occasional love and affection from your parent or whoever your guardian is, but then you have bouts of or long periods of time where you don't get that love and attention. You get, yelled at, or you maybe get some of those thoughts that you have as an adult about not being good enough, not being smart enough, not being pretty enough, not being skinny enough. Sometimes there
Yeah.
is a relationship between mothers and daughters about their weight. And so it all comes from that anxious attachment style whenever we're kids.
Interesting.
And so hopefully there's a pattern that you can break if you start to notice some of those things about yourself. Notice the overthinking. Notice that you're constantly looking for ways to allow the other person in your life, your partner, to show you the love rather than asking for, like, you know what? Hey, this is how I really want you to show me affection in the future. Can you try and find ways to like go on date nights? Or it's really about communicating. And that's the hardest part for some people.
Yeah, I feel like couples wait until it's not too late, but until it's almost too far gone to say, "Hey, the way you've been showing me love is not the way that I receive it. It is not what I need." I'm because the spouse or the other person in the relationship might think, "Oh, but I do all this for you, and that's not my love language. That's not how." I mean, you and I have had this conversation, Donnie, um, multiple times. Like, the things that he thought he was doing to show me love and, appreciation and all of that, like, those were not my receivers. The person you're in a relationship with does not know unless you tell them.
Exactly. They're
You
not
don't
ready.
have to ask for it, just tell them, and then if they don't do those things, that's on them. It's on you until you tell them. That's my opinion, but I'm not the professional here, so
No, but you know yourself. And
yeah.
honestly, that type of advice really is good for a lot of people. You don't know what you don't know. Like you
Mhm.
cannot blame a partner for not knowing something about us unless we actually tell them what we need and how we feel. Now, granted, don't always need to tell them all your feelings all at once in a rush while they're busy doing something else. Sometimes we pick
Right.
really, really inopportune times to tell people our feelings. Sometimes it really is helpful to tell your partner, hey, I really want to talk about something later tonight. Do you have time to maybe talk about it around this time or after dinner or some other time where they know that this is the conversation that we're going to be having, as opposed to just springing it on them and
Right.
expecting them to be receptive to it?
Yeah, give them time to really stress about what you're about to talk about
Exactly.
so they can
Exactly.
come correct.
Exactly. But then you also need to give them time at some point to process and give them a
Mhm.
chance to actually do the things that they agreed to do. So if you
Yeah.
ask for a certain type of validation or you ask to occasionally, like tell this to my husband all the time. I really love it when my husband specifically tells me I look nice.
Yeah.
Like I love when other people tell me, don't I believe me, I get so
We
many
all like
compliments.
compliments.
Yeah.
Everybody likes compliments, but
Can't get enough of them.
there's nothing more special than when you get a compliment from the very person that you love and you
Mhm.
respect
Yeah.
the most. And so I've had to tell him multiple times, hey, like if I look good, tell me I look good.
Please.
And he usually does, but sometimes I'll have to remind him and be like, hey, do I look nice? He's like, yeah, you look slamming.
You're like, "Thank you. I know."
Appreciate it. Like I sometimes that validation, and sometimes he does. He does do it on his own, but every once in
Yeah.
a while he has to be just kind of poked a little bit,
Mhm.
reminded.
Yeah.
but yeah, you don't know what you don't know. And so that's why it's really important to not only be honest with yourself and how you feel about certain things and what you need, but then also be honest with your partner and the person that you want to receive those things from.
Right. Yep.
I knew this quote. I had to Google it to make sure I didn't butcher it, but
I
it's
was
from,
wondering what you were doing over there on your phone. I was like,
you could
I'm
tell?
about to have to go upstairs and figure out what you're doing.
No, so Neil Strauss said, "Unspoken expectations are just premeditated resentments."
Yep.
Ooh,
Absolutely.
Neil.
Absolutely.
Ooh,
That's
yep.
deep.
And it's just so much easier just to say, hey, this is what I need.
Just call attention to it. That's the
Yeah. And
easiest way.
I would appreciate that if I was doing something for years that I thought was showing Donnie love, but actually he didn't care or really even notice. I would be so irritated that he let me do it that long
Yeah.
without telling him, without knowing this is not it for me. And it's not, it kind of feels like an uncomfortable conversation. Like, babe, I'm thinking back to like when we've had those conversations and I had to swallow a lot of pride and my ego had to make her a little quiet because it doesn't feel good to say, you feel like you're asking for something. And you kind of are, but it's like, I know you want to give me something. So here's what it should be. And it's not that like serious, it's not an ego hit. It's not,
And it
I
could
don't
very well be ego, but I feel like somewhere along the line, all of us just maybe it's just people that were brought up not around, like, super healthy relationships, but, like, at some point, everybody kind of just believes that their partner's supposed to know, everything, like, what they need and how they want it and all that stuff, but it's just not the case.
know.
Yeah, and that's
Never
important
is.
that's a really good point too, because we often mimic what we see in our childhood. So if you grew up with not very affectionate parents, you may not be that affectionate. If you grew up with parents who openly fought in front of you, you might do that in front of your kids, or you're a higher likelihood. Of course, you can always break the cycle with, self-awareness, understanding of your childhood. Those patterns aren't healthy, all those good things. But if you don't do any of those, you are doomed to repeat some of those same things. So if you don't see your parents being open with each other and having some of those conversations, or at least being honest with you about some of the conversations that they have with each other as your parents, as a married couple, not even as your
Mhm.
parents, as a married couple, then you don't know that you should expect to have those same types of conversations in your own relationships. You
Right.
may think it's normal and healthy to like repress, 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 and then explode, but it's not,
Mhm.
because
Mm-mm.
that's when you get to, so you have your codependent and then you have your avoidant people. That's when you get to that other end of the spectrum where people avoid those negative emotions and don't talk about their feelings or have a problem being vulnerable. And then it gets to the point where you can't hold it in anymore. It's like a kettle, right? So
Yeah.
we've all heard that. We have to explore those feelings before it gets to the point where we explode. So whenever you have an avoidant type of relationship, a person who is avoidant of those close relationships may be considered, or emotionally unavailable. That's the term that we call
Okay.
it. So when you think about a person like that, they may seem like they're really standoffish. They may have resting bee face, all that type of stuff. Even
Donnie.
though, even though that person, even though they may be presenting that air, they
Mhm.
actually really do want close relationships. It's just that they have a
Yes.
problem communicating. They have a problem expressing that emotion, expressing vulnerability, really asking for what they.
Yes.
Not to
I
make this about me, but I think I'm a if there might be a spectrum of these 2 things, I think I'm both.
I think
Because
you
I
are
think I
too.
yeah, I'm a, conflict avoidant, at
Mhm.
least I have been historically, I'm working on that, but I'm also obviously, attached, as well. I'm, like,
Yeah.
super, what's the word? I only get attached so far to 2 people in my whole
And who is that?
life.
Who's that second person?
Right.
Yeah. No, we have actually been talking about that a lot, how Donnie really is just attached to myself and my daughter.
Yeah.
And, that's really all I feel like
That I
he thinks
consider.
about that you think about on a daily basis of showing love and all. You're a great guy, you're a super dude, and you're a great friend, all those things. But, when it comes to conflict within this relationship, that's funny you bring that up, Donnie, because it's like you don't wanna be the one that brings it up, and you're almost relieved when I bring it up. It's like you can count on me to bring it up.
Mhm.
And you're like, "Oh, good. All right, here we go. Let's have the conversation." It's like a relief because you wanna talk about it, but you don't wanna be the one that brings it up.
Yeah. Like I said,
So
something I'm
so work
definitely
on
working
that.
on. Yeah.
Yeah, there's actually a lot of people like that though. There's a lot of people where they lean on their partner to be whatever they are not, whatever they are lacking. And that's honestly sometimes what draws us to people. A lot of people think it's, you have commonalities, all that good stuff. That's a big part of it. But what also draws us to people or draws people to us is we are lacking something in each other. And so we
Mhm.
want to find those very things in a partner. That's why, you have one person that's a spender, one person that's a saver, one person who's very stylish, one person who keeps it super minimal, you have one person who likes to talk about conflict, easy, open, wonderful. And they kind of expect the other person in that relationship to constantly bring up those things. Here's the key though. If things are brought up in the relationship, how do you respond to them as an avoidant person?
Mhm.
Do you kind of need a moment to just digest it, walk away, kind of get your own thoughts together and then bring them? Or do you kind of more fly off the handle, or do you just need to just go ahead and get it all out in that moment? That sometimes is where we have to kind of check in again with ourselves and understand what we need in those conflict moments. And also, we need to tell our partner, this is what I need. Like, give me like 5 or 10 minutes. Give
Yeah.
me and also anxiety, since we need to throw in that word again.
Yeah.
Anxiety also shows up so much in our bodies too. And so, whenever we are super tense, I've had a patient before who gets really, really, really anxious whenever there's any kind of a conflict. Like she wants to bring up the topic, but her neck starts to hurt because we naturally want to do
Oh,
this
yeah.
in
We're like
times of
this.
anxiety. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Like whenever you do anything with your body, your shoulders are near your earlobes, like all of that brings such a physical manifestation of your anxiety. And so there's no way that you can have a productive conversation when your body is contorted in this weird way.
Yeah,
And
you're
it's
in fight or flight.
exactly. And so even though you want to maybe bring something up, maybe you need to kind of take a minute, respond to your body, understand that your body is going to help dictate what else comes out of your mouth.
Yeah.
If your body's tense, your voice is going to be tense. If you are uncomfortable, you're going to breathe that uncomfortable nature in whatever you talk about. And so it's really important to check in with yourself as both a codependent or an anxious person, just a person in general with anxiety, to make sure that you are not only checking in with yourself before those moments of conflict in a relationship, but then also allowing the other person that grace too,
Yes.
because we don't know, again, we don't know what we don't know. And so we want that other person to bring their best selves in this moment too. So we can have a productive conversation. Keyword productive. We can have a blowout easy,
Alright.
but it's
Yeah.
really taking the time and understanding that the other person is going to need what I just gave myself or what they have given me in the past, which is maybe a moment to cool off, maybe a moment to collect their own thoughts. I've been overthinking this for the last 6 days.
Yeah,
And
I'm
this is
ready to
level
go.
one. Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
You got points. You're
Oh,
coming
yeah.
in hot.
Yes.
But maybe you need to give that other person that same type of grace to where they are allowed to share their own thoughts and feelings. So reflect on what you said. They want to help you. You're in this together. They want to be in a partnership with you. So give them a chance to be a true partner.
I feel like, Donnie, I need to work on the letting you when I bring it up, giving you the time to actually share your collected thoughts. So I'm committing to you in this moment that I will give you time. I won't love it, but I'll do it.
What does that look like?
I don't know. We'll figure it out. That means you have 10
30
beats rather
seconds.
than 2 beats to reply.
I love it.
Hey, that's growth. That is growth.
Progress, baby steps.
I do appreciate, though, as somebody who brings it up and is ready to talk about it right now, I do, after the fact, appreciate that he wants and usually takes the time to give a thoughtful response. I do appreciate that about you, and I wish that I could do that as well. But so if anybody listening is like me, maybe try to appreciate that they want to give you a thoughtful response. It's respectful. It's, I love you, so I want to make sure I don't say something stupid or,
Yeah, I think historically, I feel like, and maybe that goes back to like the testing nature of some actions, but I felt like if I didn't have something to respond right away, you would assume that I was like coming up with a story, or if something is the truth, why can't you just say it right away? And I would be like, it just takes me a
okay,
minute to get my thoughts together, kind of a thing.
yeah, you're just not as quick as me, and it's fine. I kid. I kid. But that, so we're talking about this a lot as like women are the one doing this, but there are guys too that
Oh, yeah.
wanna be the ones to, "Let's have this conversation right
Oh,
now." I feel like
absolutely.
as a woman, that could be a little intimidating. I feel like there's gonna be a little bit different there. But it
Yeah,
just goes down.
okay.
No, you
What's
go.
the best way for a man to do it?
Oh, men
You men.
are, yeah,
It probably
Men are
depends on the
what?
partner.
Men are what? Let's do it, Sable.
No.
men are historically less willing to be confronted about their lack of abilities in certain ways or their behaviors sometimes. It doesn't happen to every man. This is not every man. This is not every woman. This is not everybody. But when it comes to checking in with your feelings, checking in with your emotions, a lot of times because of the society that we live in, this blame society, men are often taught not to really check in with themselves. Man's right. This is kind of my place in the home. I just, bring home money and this is what I do. Thankfully, that's been changing over the last, 20, 30 years, but there's still a lot of families that really that's a tenet in their home that maybe the male in the relationship doesn't necessarily talk about their feelings all the time. I know that
Right.
that's something that happens a lot in my family, but thankfully, as my family has gotten older, as my parents have gotten older, my dad is very open with his feelings. Tells me he
Yeah.
loves me all the time, wants to give
Oh,
like the best hugs, like tells me he's
that's
proud
sweet.
of me. We talk about, politics. We talk about really everything. And he talks about certain things with such passion. But when I think about, him as when I was a child, he didn't always necessarily explore his feelings in a way that was clear. Sometimes it was a little bit more uh, coming from a place of that avoidant and then it just exploded. He
Mhm.
Yeah.
wasn't really taking the time to really think out, this is what I need to say. This is how I need to say it. Even with my own children, even though I love them, it sometimes comes out as, all the negative thoughts that I maybe even have about myself.
Yeah.
But it still stems from a place of love and care, but it's not really done in the best way. And so when it comes to men in relationships, men do trap.
Mhm.
Men,
Yes.
I've been in a relationship where a male has set a trap before, and I've talked to other people where they have talked about how a male partner of theirs has, questioned. I mentioned something earlier about the, texting people back very quickly. That's happened before to a lot of people. And with
Yeah.
the ease in which that we think people can easily text somebody back, if they're at work, if they're out with a friend of theirs, constantly asking them, when are you going to be home? Why aren't you responding to me? Did I do something wrong? Like there's plenty of people that do that, male and female. And then also, of course, we have to consider relationships that are LGBTQ, where you
Mhm.
have people that are also trying to understand what their place is in the relationship from that perspective.
Right.
Um, so there's a lot of different things that happen, men and women. I'm so glad you brought that up, Stephanie.
Yeah.
Because both of these things, we're of course speaking because we identify as female.
Mhm.
And so we're speaking from that perspective. But I
Yeah.
think it's really important to reiterate the fact that men can overthink. Men can, think of all the ways that they could be rejected by somebody.
Yeah, worst
And
case
that
scenarios.
exactly, exactly. And so it happens to all of us.
Yeah.
And women can explode and women can fly off the handle. And so it's not necessarily always dictated to those stereotypes
Right.
within the male and female genders. Um, but it can be just really across the spectrum. It really can.
Yeah. Donnie, I don't think you've ever tried to set a trap for me before. You're just vibing.
Yeah, I'm not a trapper guy. I mean, I think that would be like the opposite of conflict avoidant, right? That would be like creating a creating a conflict. But I mean, to round out what you just said, for sure, I'm conflict avoidant because somewhere way, way, way deep, I'm afraid that the conflict is going to expose a lack of love or a something that makes me unlovable or, one of those things. So I can see I have observed in plenty of other people's relationships where the man is more guilty of that than the woman. So I didn't mean to if I said anything that made it seem like I was blaming women for any of this stuff, I'm definitely wasn't. I was just
We
blaming
weren't
Stephanie for that
trapping you.
in our relation.
You're really
Just like I
glad
said.
we're not in the same room.
But I
All
think
right.
something that you mentioned earlier too, I just wanted to say this right quick. Talking to your partner about your anxiety and how it manifests is a huge part of that communication piece. So if you know that you don't handle conflict well, go ahead and say that. It's okay
Yeah.
to say, you know what, I don't handle conflict well. They will remember that. They will remember that, especially if they really want to get to know you and understand how you can communicate better and be a better partner to them. Understanding all of the trigger points, all of the things that will manifest somebody else's anxiety. You can learn how to avoid those things. You can learn how to unfortunately, some people use those as weapons as well,
Mm.
especially if we know the things that'll push somebody else's buttons. Obviously, that's the unhealthy way to do it. But the healthy way to do it is really allowing that other person to understand you, take time to understand you, give them a chance to, I always say, give people a chance to fail. Give
Yeah.
people a chance to fail. You can give them all the tools, all the information, but what they choose to do with it is up to them. And that will also let you know if this isn't a relationship that is good for you. Because, of course, I also want to mention this too. All of these things can be worked on, but only if that person is willing to work on them.
Mm.
Right. Yes.
Some
Okay.
things
So
cannot be.
You've had some jewels today.
Yeah.
I was gonna go into that a little more. Okay. Say you're in it and
Yeah.
the other person is not willing to change or fix it. And they have very well said, I'm not, this is how I am. I'm not changing. What are you supposed to do?
Honestly, you have to evaluate if this is going to be a healthy environment for you.
Yeah.
Um, no one wants a relationship to end. And I think that's
Right.
where that codependency comes in, where you fear the unknown. If you're already married, there's even legal things, obviously, that you have to take into account because getting a divorce is incredibly expensive these days.
Is
Um,
it? How much do you know how much it
ooh,
costs for like regular people?
ooh. It depends on how much money they have together, how much
Okay.
property they have together, how much just general assets, because it can cost anywhere between lawyers' time and then the
Yeah.
actual money that somebody might have to dish out. It can cost anywhere between, the cheap end obviously is like $5,000, but it
Hmm.
can cost upwards of hundreds of thousands of dollars. When you factor in that retainer for attorney,
Yeah.
so sure, a lot of people don't want, especially if you've built a life together
Hmm.
and you've tried to make it work and you've gone to couples therapy. The couples therapist hopefully will start to realize too that maybe there isn't something that can be fixed within couples therapy. Sometimes it really is just one person that needs to heal some of those childhood wounds in some of those negative thought patterns that they have about themselves. You
Right.
can't do that in couples therapy. You can't.
Mm-mm.
It has to be that one person working on themselves. And so if you have a couple that has one partner that doesn't want to work on themselves, doesn't really want to hear all of these things about themselves, because nobody does. Nobody likes to hear.
No, it's not fun.
No, not at all. But if even if you come at it from a loving, gentle, supportive way, if it's still not received in that way, the other partner has to figure out if this is going to be a healthy environment for them. If they can live with it, there's been many couples throughout the history of time that have
Mhm.
swept things under the rug and kept it moving. But nobody wants to live in an environment where they feel unsafe
Yeah.
or they have to walk on eggshells. Nobody wants that. You
No.
want a life of joy and love. And not every moment's going to be perfect, of course, but you have to understand if this is not healthy for me, all of those things that happen within that relationship can manifest to directly impact your physical health. It can wreck your physical body, not just your
Yeah.
mental capacity, but just your physical body. If you are in a heightened state of stress all the time, you can't bring things up. Nobody wants to live in that type of environment, especially if you have children too. So
Yeah.
whether you have, whether or not it's considered a abusive environment, it may not necessarily be considered abuse for some people, but in some cases, it might fall into the preview or the purview of being in a environment that is conducive to abuse. And so
Right.
anytime you feel unsafe, anytime you feel unloved, you have to go somewhere else. You have to.
So there are people in relationships who stay in, a marriage or a long-term relationship. They have kids and they think I'm going to just continue to try to keep the peace for my family.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, as you probably know, it's not peaceful. What is your advice there? If that's their way of thinking, like I need to keep the peace for the kids or for this spouse that is wreaking havoc in this home, what would you say to that person?
That is so hard because as therapists, we encourage self determination. That is a huge part of what we do. And there's so many limits because we can't offer advice in that way,
Right.
but we constantly refer back to the type of environment that you are wanting to create for your children.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want an environment that is, like I said earlier, you have to walk on eggshells around people, you have to withhold your feelings, which sometimes also means withholding affection? Or do you want a household that is full of love and support and healthy conflict and healthy communication skills? What does that look like for you? What is your
Mm-hmm.
household? What is your optimal dream household? Not the actual physical house, but the
Right.
atmosphere that you want to create. What does that look like to you? And if they are perfectly fine with, you know what, I'll keep working on it, I'll see what I can do, then we as therapists have to support that.
Right. Right.
We don't want someone to get the impression that we are telling them what to do, that we are, trying to dictate every aspect of their life. But since they are coming to us for our professional clinical opinion,
Mm-hmm.
we want to make sure that we arm them with as many tools and with as many opportunities to cultivate the environment that they want to create.
Okay.
And so we try and put that onus back on them. We try and encourage them to think about the household, think about what you have now. 5 years from now, what do you want it to look like? Okay, can you achieve that in 3 years, 2 years, 1 year? And if it can't be achieved theoretically within 1 to 3 years, it probably isn't going to be achievable in 5. It
Yeah.
really isn't, unless some act of God happens,
Mm-hmm.
and that other partner is able to see the light.
Right.
um, then it may be time for them to walk away.
Yeah. That's a hard
Yeah,
pill to swallow too,
it
I'm
is.
sure.
Oh yeah.
Something you said, healthy conflict. There is not a relationship that has zero conflict. And if it doesn't, I think that's a big red flag. So I don't know if we have like a lot of time to talk about this, but healthy conflict, what does that look like?
I think it goes back to some of the things that we've probably mentioned before and that you guys have mentioned before in some of your previous podcasts. It is having enough self awareness to know that there is a conflict at
Hmm.
all, because we naturally want to avoid it. But most things are worth talking about, especially if they involve your partner or feelings that you have about your partner or they have about you. Again, you have to dive deep in yourself, humble yourself, quiet that ego, and acknowledge that there is some sort of a conflict. Now, when it actually comes to the conversation, that can mean a number of different things. It can mean
Hmm.
anything from scheduling the time to talk about the conflict, and actually letting them know, like, hey, this is what I think is going on. You're not, you're not at home every night at by 7. You're working really late. I want to talk about that more.
Right.
If that's the thing, like just giving them an idea of maybe what the conflict is before you actually talk about it gives them a
Hmm.
moment to be like, oh yeah, that has been happening. Let me kind of think about that a little bit more. That way you're kind of not quite coming in on an even playing field, but as even as you can make it without actually
Right.
talking about it full fledged in that moment. So actually alerting them of what that conflict is and then allowing people space to talk. That's the thing, because we automatically
Hmm.
want to get so defensive and, well, I'm not doing anything wrong and you do this.
Yeah.
But that's not helping anything. That's not helping anything at all. And so giving one person a moment to be like, okay, here's why I wanted to mention this. This is what's happening. Using those I feel statements, not pointing the finger at them. And then also getting to the root of what's going on. So, for instance, if it's somebody's not coming home, they're working really late, they're staying out until 7 o'clock, they're not in time for dinner, they're not able to see the kids. Okay. Those are all things, all viable points. But what does that really come from? You have to analyze, what does that come from? It comes from, I love you, I want to see you more often. Our kids love you, our kids want to see you more often. I miss you. And I think maybe you might be getting taken advantage of because you're not able to see and spend more time with your family. That's
Right.
really what the root of it is. But on the
Yeah.
surface level, it just looks like nagging, or it looks
Yeah.
like some
You're
other,
screwing up.
you're
You're not
screwing up.
enough.
Exactly. Yeah, there's, I
Yeah.
can never do anything right. Like the other person might take it that way. The
Right.
goal is, of course, for
Usually.
them not, yeah. The goal is, of course, for them not to, but
Right.
they might. And you have to be prepared for that as the person bringing this up.
Hmm.
The respondent, who maybe is the, I don't want to say target, because target is not, who's the subject
There
of
you
the
go.
conversation. The subject of the conversation needs to also, again, dive deep in themselves, understand what their partner is saying, really listen to what their partner is saying, not just hear it, but listen for those key clues, like I love you and I want to spend more time with you, really latching onto those things as opposed to you're not here, where are you, our kids are missing you, our kids are never going to grow up with you, like all those types
Yeah.
of things
I
that
did all
probably,
this stuff at home by myself today.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly, yeah, that's what that they're likely also hearing, but quieting that down to a moment of, again, really listening to those root causes and those root problems that are going on. And again, taking a moment, if you need a moment to be like, you know what, I need a moment to just kind of step away so I can kind of think about this, so I can make sure that I give you what you need and I come up with a plan.
Hmm.
Now, that's not, again, that's not always received well by the other person. It's not. But you can maybe say something as like a placeholder. You
Right.
don't have to be like, I need to walk away. This is over.
I'm
I'll
about
come.
to say something.
Yeah, exactly. I don't want to be mean to you. Like you don't want to, yeah, yeah, no. You don't want to do any of that. What you can instead say is, thank you for bringing this up. I
Hmm.
appreciate you even wanting to talk about this. I need a moment to make sure that I come up with a plan for us. So again, actually talk out loud what you're thinking. Not
Yes.
everything, but talk out
Right.
loud of what the plan is and why you want the time away. That
Yeah.
is healthy communication. That is actually forming the words to what is likely you are feeling.
Mhm.
So actually embodying those feelings that you have. So take a moment, realize what you need, express what you need and why you need it. And again, hopefully the other person gives you grace. If they're
Right.
like, no, I want to talk about this now. If we don't talk about it now, we won't talk about it later. Set a time for you all to revisit this conversation.
Yeah. Send that calendar invite
Absolutely. Yeah.
for
If it
sure.
comes to that, absolutely. If it comes to
Yeah.
that, a lot of people think that that is a very transactional, business minded way to do things.
Hmm.
But that holds you both accountable because you're both getting that alert that says, okay, we talked about this on Tuesday, Friday night, we need to revisit this.
Yeah.
And again, the subject matter of this conversation needs that time to express what they're feeling. So just as they did it for you, you have to do it for them.
So there was a point, excuse me, somebody gave me this advice. Donnie and I, our relationship was in a really weird spot. It like a not a good spot. And everything felt personal.
Mm,
And everything he did felt personal when never in our relationship had he ever done something to personally upset me, right? And somebody gave me this advice that you have to remember if you are in a relationship with somebody that you love and that you know respects you and all of that, you have to remember they are coming from a good place. Their intentions are good. The way I am receiving them is not good because I am in this is a me problem, actually, right? Not a we problem. So I think a lot of that too with healthy conflict is knowing someone's intentions are good and being able to have that foundation of, okay, he's not trying to hurt me. He's not trying to do these things. Let me figure out why I'm feeling this way, right? And creating that space for those conversations that so they're not so scary or hurt your ego or make you feel less than, right? They're coming from a good spot.
yeah. Assume good intent.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Always assume good intent. Because if you've made it this far, if you are open to continuing this relationship, there's obviously a source of love and respect that you can draw from in
Hmm.
order to always assume that the other person is coming from a good place. Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. And this kind of you had mentioned that you wanted to talk about this too. So like when we were in that phase where it was clearly a me problem and not a we problem. Um and you've kind of touched on this a little bit. We just haven't used the words. It's like inner child stuff that
Mm-hmm.
you saw growing up, that you felt growing up. And that is such a huge piece that is overlooked so often when it comes to relationships, right?
Yeah,
Inner child,
absolutely.
as it relates to me, is one thing that I can talk about and connect all day. But when you're trying to connect that inner child to your relationships, it's a lot harder. For
Yeah.
I mean, for me personally, it's a lot harder because you have to realize a whole set of other things.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a lot of hard work for a lot of people too. It
Yeah.
really is.
Yeah, it's not super fun.
Yeah, I think people, it's everyone wants to like, I don't know if it compartmentalizes is the right word, but people always want to have just this one thing that needs to be addressed or this one label that will make everything make sense. But when you stop and realize that like every experience you've had from the day you were born to up to now is the lens that you view the world through,
Yeah.
it's like, oh, well then yeah, like whatever color that lens is, like we got to keep going back farther and farther and farther to clean that lens off
Yeah.
or to, do whatever needs to be done. So yeah, I mean, I think Steph made that point because we're Stephanie and I are kind of like going through inner child work at the moment and just being really observational of I guess what you might call like our instincts or our gut reactions or even just like our perspectives and seeing how much of that can be shaped just by what we've been through and how we perceived it in those moments. It's a really really interesting topic that could probably be like multiple episodes.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, it's a really It's a deep well for sure.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. You think it's just one, ingredient. You think it's just the onions. It's just the
Hmm.
onions, right? But no,
Mhm.
it's a whole stew. It
Hmm.
is a whole mishmash of stuff from your past that has made you who you are for good and bad.
Yep.
There just needs to be, some salt, a little therapy added just to make it
Yeah.
make it right, right? So there's certainly hope for a lot of people that are in relationships where there is maybe some avoidant or codependent types of personalities there. There's definitely hope there. But again, you have to realize that this may not be a relationship issue. It may really be a you issue. And
Yeah.
you have to work on that in order to make your relationship with everybody, not just your partner, relationship with your children, your relationship with your family, your relationship with your friends, makes your relationships at work so much better too.
Yeah.
So when you start to realize that it's more of a holistic point of view, you healing your inner child, that is a game changer. It really can be.
We never even used the word abandonment trauma or anything on this episode, but I feel like that goes so hand in hand with most
Yeah.
inner child work.
Yeah.
Not because, and I think it kind of goes back to the same, in my eyes, trauma sounds so dramatic, but in reality, it's just anything that caused a ripple in your
Mhm.
life.
Yeah.
And then the same with abandonment, like not everybody's mom died when they were 3. Not everybody's dad walked out on the family or whatever. But when you view human beings as like, we have such a high capacity for love and such a high need for love that no matter what, along the line somewhere, you are going to experience an abandonment trauma of some kind.
Yeah.
I think that's a really important thing to. I think that that's, and maybe it's just me, but I think that that is the source of a lot of this other stuff that we're talking about. The whatever your conflict style is, whatever your attachment style is, goes back to that. I just don't want to be left.
Yeah.
I want to. I love this person so much that I don't want them to go away from me, and
Hmm.
so I'm going to do whatever it takes, no matter how unreasonable or illogical or whatever the case may be, to keep them here.
Yeah. There's a ton of research about, you know, that went into the formation of attachment styles. So you have the children that were left for hours at a time without any love, without any touch from anybody, and how they grew up to be these very repressed, maladaptive types of personalities that found it difficult to engage in loving relationships because they were abandoned. But at the same time, they really want that love though. They
Mm-hmm.
want it. They just express it differently. So even we kind of going back to conflict, understanding what your partner needs in that moment of conflict is really important physically though too. Often when we think of conflict, we think of, on separate sides of the couch, you're in, separate sides of the room. Honestly, reach out a hand and touch the other person. Hold hands, rub the back of the other person. You can physically show that you are still very much in love with this person and that you care for this person even while engaged in conflict. Like
Yeah.
that's a huge thing for a lot of people who grew up with those types of abandonment issues. It's really important to give them that validation in that moment, knowing I'm not going to leave you, I'm not going anywhere. I just want to talk about this.
That's really good advice.
Yeah, that goes a long way. It's fun. It made me think about these blowups that we've been experiencing with our daughter, and I'll
Oh
do that.
boy.
I'll reach my hand out, or I'll, don't touch me. And that's, I mean, she's little, so that's
Clearly
different. And
doesn't have
That's different.
abandonment
That's
yeah,
issues.
different. Yeah.
yeah, it just made me laugh thinking about that. But yeah, in my own experience, because that is mine, is like abandonment based stuff. Like anytime that Steph has shown that we are just addressing something that is negative, but I'm not going anywhere, that goes a long way to like help me be more present and less defensive or whatever the case, whatever the wall that I would throw up would be, that breaks it down almost immediately.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
your face changes. when I make sure to add that clause in there, that little asterisk at the beginning, because
Yeah.
it'll be just this defeated long face. And I'm like, hey, this isn't like a serious thing. Like, I'm just want to bring this up. And then you just see the relief like wash over his face. It's very sad and sweet. So I got to remember to add that asterisk clause into things.
It's a very important asterisk.
It
I'm,
is.
I'm not leaving. First of all, I found out how expensive it was, so not going
Yeah.
anywhere.
Appreciate it, Sable.
I kept y'all together for at least another 10 years.
Yeah,
Jeez.
exactly.
Yeah.
It'll just keep getting more expensive.
It's true. It's very true.
I think it's really important for people to know in relationships, not all conflict is bad conflict. If you truly love and respect each other, just have the conversation. And if you feel like there is no love or respect, probably call Sable. Call Ellie Mental Health. For real, make an appointment. Let's figure that out. And then learn how to have that healthy conflict, those hard conversations. Truly. And I think people feel like, oh, well, if we go to couples therapy, that means we're not making it. No way. Just do a once a year pulse check. You know what I mean? It's not a divorce sentence. It's not a relationship killer. It's not, oh man, people are going to find out we're going. It's not like that. Quit being weird. Quit making it weird, people. It's so good. And you learn things about each other. So I can't stress that enough, how important that is. Ellie Mental Health does it. Tanglewood, hit them up. We'll put our girls' contact information here. Yeah, just have the conversations. Love, respect. You come from there and receive it from there, right?
Yeah, and what's really nice too is we are seeing so many more people that are in relationships that they're not married yet. They're not even thinking about marriage yet. They're just in a partnership with somebody else and they want to get therapy so they don't repeat some of the patterns that they've seen their own families do in partnerships.
That's amazing.
So it's not even considered premarital counseling. Not really, because they're not even marriage on the brain. They just want to address the things that made their relationship with their parents not work. They just want to understand what they can do better. Maybe there's some deeper things that they can understand better of each other as a couple, but then also maybe split apart and decide, I need some separate therapy, some individual therapy on my own to address some of those other deeper issues. So that's really fantastic that we've been seeing that over the last 6 months or so.
That's great.
Not to live in the past, but I think that would have been really good for us, babe, when we were dating. I think we gained, I don't like that word, but we gained some super codependency issues on each other throughout like our dating relationship, just based off things that were happening in my life, things that were happening in his life. We were so young. And if we could have just had that knowledge, or had access to something like that, oh my gosh, how huge would that have been?
Yeah. Life-changing.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, Sable, so lovely to have you back.
As
you
always.
look beautiful. I know I'm not your husband, but you look beautiful.
I appreciate that validation.
All right.
Thank you so much for coming on. I was trying to think if I had something in closing that I wanted to say, but I don't. This was a great episode. So thank you so much for coming on. Thank you to the listeners and viewers for being here still. And we look forward to having Sable on again.
Thanks.
Thank you guys. Bye.